Welcome to the Soul Revolution Tribe podcast, where we share stories, laughs, and even a few tears, but always a good time. We are about depth and real raw sharing through soul conversations and medicine. We are learning to find ourselves again and to be an unstoppable force of nature, ready to break down the constructs and rebuild them with love and acceptance at its core. We are the new world. Welcome back to another episode of the Soul Revolution Tribe. I'm Jackie B. I'm your host and Shamanic Soul Guide and Remembrance Facilitator. And today I have my friend Sandra, and I'm so excited for her to be on here and sharing her wisdom. Sandra is a resilience coach. She guides women through through injury recovery to better health. She's all about mindset, motivation, and self-care. So thank you so much for being with us today, Sandra.
Well, thank you for having me.
I'm so
It's
excited.
always a pleasure.
Yeah, we always have these deep conversations. And so I'm like, we have to have one of these episodes. We get to have one of these episodes on the podcast as well. So today I wanted to share with the listeners about how we've had conversations about resilience and what resilience actually means versus like the textbook of somebody may see resilience. So I would love to dive into that. But first, share a little bit of your story. Let the listeners know a little bit about you and where you're coming from.
Well, I've been a single parent since my oldest was 3.5. My ex-husband was very abusive, verbally, mentally, emotionally. And really, I've had a lifetime of injuries. And I've come to revelations as to why that has occurred, which we'll probably get into. I actually have no idea how many injuries I've had. I've had someplace between 15 and 20 car accidents. I've broken somewhere between 10 and 12 bones. I was always very active, so I've had sports-related injuries. I've had a few surgeries. And it just always seemed that when I kind of got to a place of stasis, so to speak, in terms of my injury recovery, another thing would happen. So I heard the word resilient used years ago, like a woman I know that started a group called Resilient Women in Business. And long before that, I was told, oh, you're just so resilient. You just keep going. Whatever happens, you just keep moving through. And, like sometimes your movement gets slower, but it always continues. You don't stop. Nothing keeps you down for long. And I used to take some pride in that. Like, yeah, I'm just tough. Like, don't mess with me. I'm just going to keep right on going, like poof, poof, poof.
True.
All right. And then in the last years, I've kind of started thinking, because I've looked at how I got through things, and much of that was not very healthy for my body. Ignoring what was happening in my body, my feelings, disconnecting completely from my body, because it hurt so much to think about it was a lot. So in order to be able to keep going and keep doing what I needed to do to support my children and all that kind of stuff and keep working, I just didn't stop. And I disconnected from my body. And that's been my journey the last years, is to reconnect myself to my body. And I know we've had many conversations around that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a common theme for a lot of people, is remembering, because society teaches us to mind over matter, push through it. The brain has
Suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah, you hear all of these sayings, and I get what they're saying, but at the same point, like when we had this conversation, because you're like, I don't know, do I keep resilience? Do I not? And then we broke it down, and you're like, but you are the definition of resilience, but not the way that everybody portrays. So let's look at it from a different perspective. So we talked about that and how the true definition of resilience gets to shine through, and that's what you embody. It's not about pushing through. It's when we learn true resiliency is when we open up and we are allowed to embrace the situation, yet we don't drown in it. That's resiliency to me, is where we're going through and we're navigating the storms that come, because we can't stop the storms, right? Life is always going to have something coming our
Mhm.
way, but are we dancing in the rain? Are we allowing it to drown us or keep us hidden in that space? Like that's the big thing, is like, literally when I think resilience, I think of like the Marvel movie, Captain Marvel, where she falls down, and in the end, it's like the whatever is like putting her down, and she shows her all the time she's fallen or failed, quote unquote, and then she ends up coming back and going, every time she fell down and skinned her knee or knocked the wind out of herself, she got back up.
Mhm.
That's the key. That's the resilience of, no matter what gets thrown at me, I get back up. That doesn't mean I don't take a moment to go, whoo, I got to catch my breath, or ooh, that stung, and honor that process. But I am the one that gets to decide my journey, not anyone
Right.
else, not anything external. It's I get the final say. To me, that's what it is. So what are you seeing as we talked about this and kind of going through, what's your definition of resilience now, and why it's resonating?
Um, Before I say that, I just want to read what Oxford
Hmm.
Dictionary um, defines as resilience. As an adjective, it's able to withstand or recover quickly from difficult conditions. And this is in regards to a person or an animal. And and for an object, it says able to recoil or spring back into shape after bending, stretching, or being compressed. So I kind of like the reason I added the one about the object is, spring back into shape after bending, stretching, or being compressed.
Hmm.
Um, because I don't think really when events happen in your life, when things happen, I don't necessarily know that it's you want to go back to the shape that you were in,
Yes.
because I mean things are going to happen in your life. And what I've learned is that um hindsight being 2020, all these injuries and all these things that were happening were my body's way, I believe, of trying to talk to me.
Yes.
Because what I've really understand now is that, I mean, pain is not a bad thing, even though it can feel absolutely horrible at the time. It's your body trying to give you a message.
Mhm. Communicate.
And 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 see that this is where I was struggling back, and I think that was in March. But this is where I was struggling, like with the word resilience, because trying to go back to where I was, and I didn't quite connect what my issue was. Um, but trying to go back to where I was, that is what triggered
Mhm.
the need for, no, I'm trying to give you a message that something's not as it is, as it should be, or not as it should be, but as me as your body wants it to be.
In alignment and harmony and optimal function.
That's right. So my body is trying to talk to me. It's trying to say, hey, there's something wrong here. And I had people tell me over the years, like a couple of years after I had major surgery on my leg, I got to the point where I couldn't even function. I was driving home from work, my way home to work and on my way to work, I would cry the whole way. I'd get home and, I'd take care of dinner and everything. And when I go and have a shower, I'd cry in the shower. And I always thought, hey, this is great. Like I'm getting all these feelings out and they're just getting washed down the drain. And, the analogy of that was perfect because, yeah, I see I'm letting all these feelings go. I'm letting all this pain go and I'm letting it wash down the drain. Um, Yet at that point, I believe I was taking that word resilient to mean something that was becoming negative.
Almost like a
It's,
hardening of the heart. Love, okay,
yeah,
let myself feel a little bit, and now we're gonna suck it up.
yeah,
We're gonna put the strong face on, put the warrior pose on, and move forward and trudge through. Like
that's right.
that's sometimes how resilience is portrayed, but that's not always the truth.
Exactly. And that's how I started looking at it, which is when we had that conversation, I said, I don't know if I should keep this,
Mhm.
because at that point I was recognizing that my resilience was actually a negative
Yeah.
aspect of.
It was almost the definition, the energy that it was surrounding it was kind of holding you back to a point
Mhm,
until we dissolved some of the structures and cleared out this disillusionment, and then decided, what do I feel that that word means? And what is
mhm,
it at its core? And that's actually resilience, the definition you're talking about. So when it springs back to the form, what comes to me is not to the form you were right before the trauma happened or anything like that. It's almost like coming back to that childlike state, that pure, innocent, like heart open, experiencing and enjoying life. That's how I see it, is coming back into that state. It doesn't mean like physically necessarily. It's just that type of energy of freeing
mhm.
yourself from all of the conditioning and the limits and the pressure, and allowing myself just to breathe and take that deep breath in and say, no matter what life throws at me, like, because if you look at a kid, like, they stumble, they fall, they run into things, and like half the time they don't even realize it because they're so in the motion and playing. They recover quickly when that. And if you notice, like when a little kid falls, a lot of the times they don't even, it's not that they're hurt, they don't even know how to respond. They look around to the adults around them
Mhm.
to say, "Is this okay?" Or what is my reaction supposed to be? And if you are panicking, then they panic. If you're going, "Oh, it's okay," and you're having that calm, regulated state, then they tend to bounce back. And that's what I see you doing, is like, I'm coming in this grounded space, and I'm not coming above you. I'm coming next to you and saying, "Yeah, I've traveled storms too. And I know that it doesn't feel good in this moment. And I want you to honor that. And I want you to kind of see that little ray of the rainbow after the storm. And we're not bypassing where we are now, but knowing there's a rainbow and we're going to navigate, we're going to get there. We know, even if we can't see it, we know that that's what comes after the storm.
Yeah,
And figuring out
yeah,
what your rainbow is.
yeah. And I like how you brought into, the bouncing back to, how was that word again? Sorry. I just thought,
Bring
oh,
back
well,
to
let's just
original
look
form
at,
or something.
yeah, able to recoil or spring back into shape after bending. And I started looking at it that, okay, recoil back into the shape that I was before, but that before wasn't, as you said,
Mhm.
before the trauma happened, or even 5 years before. It was going back into the natural state, where when you are able to release the emotions and acknowledge the emotions and recognize what they are and listen to your body
Yes, that pure.
and the message that it's trying to give you, that going back into the shape before all of those things started happening, before all of the times when I started pushing my feelings away and not acknowledging them. Or like Gary told me, he says, you as a Capricorn, it's like you're driving through a neighborhood and your emotions are all the houses on the side, and you're just driving right through.
Yeah.
That
You may say
they're
hi, you
there.
may wave, but you're not actually being in connection with them.
Yeah, yeah.
But
So
you said,
I
"Hey,
thought,
I said hi. I acknowledged them. I did it."
yeah, yeah. See, look, that one's a greenhouse and there's a blue one, and oh, look at that door. It's green. But that's just, like taking a Polaroid picture that just
Checking the
doesn't.
boxes versus stepping into that uncomfortability. And that's when, like, for me, the image of, we scold children, but if you think about it, they're actually more healthy with their emotions than we are.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're hurt or something's upset, you will know. yes, maybe they channel it in like not the most ideal situation, but they refuse to store it at that point. We teach them how to store it. We teach them how to
Yes.
suppress it a lot of the times. And so it's not that we should all be throwing giant tantrums all day long. I'm not saying that, but it's honoring that. And how I say it is in the situation where I feel those little gut punches and those little trigger moments of going, "Ooh, that didn't feel good." Like I can feel my inner child going, "I don't like that. I don't like what you're saying about me." I sit and acknowledge, and I say, "Okay," and we get to go back to that. Right now, we're gonna do this. Like it's almost like a what is it? Compromise. Like right now, we're gonna finish the task at hand that we're doing XYZ, and I promise we're gonna come back to that, and then we get to talk about how that did make you feel, and what we mean make that mean. Because we, at the end of the day, are the only one in control of our emotions and our own understanding of the situation. Somebody can say whatever they want to you, but it's our decision whether we let it in as our truth or not.
Well, here's an interesting thing I heard long ago. I was at a convention and this man said, he said, if I came up to you right now and spat in your face, what would you be? Like, how would you feel? And like people around are like, oh, that would piss me off, or I'd be angry or whatever. And so, let the audience kind of chitter a bit. And he says, you know what you would feel? You would feel wet
Mm-hmm.
from my spit. Whatever emotion comes up is coming from you.
Yeah.
Because what I've done is something on me. That's me doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Your response to that is coming from you.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really, really powerful. Um, you were talking about kids and emotions, and like we know when kids are happy, like you say. When kids are happy, we know when they're tired or hungry or hangry or whatever,
Or
we
something
know.
is not going their way. They are not
That's
in
right.
alignment with the
We
situation.
know if they get hurt, um, and like you said before, they'll look at the adults around and to see how they're responding. Um, but obviously, if they're really hurt, then
Well,
they're
that
they're
and
going to immediately
yeah,
cry. They're going to
yep,
if
yep,
there's pain, if they've scraped their knee, if it really hurt, they're
mhm,
not going to look at anyone.
yep.
They're going to immediately respond.
And sometimes they look
So,
to see if it's okay. I catch my middle one sometimes, like he'll fall, he'll scrape his knee, and then I know he's hurting, and he'll kind of look and he'll look around and try to like fight back the tears, and I'm like, it's okay. You fell, you hurt. That's okay. It's okay to admit that, and that doesn't make you any less of a human being.
well, I know my youngest daughter, she never wanted to cry in front of people, and I can remember a couple times, horsing around with the uncles that she got hurt, and it would be like, "Oh, are you okay?" "Oh, yeah, yeah, I'm okay." And then she'd get up and she'd walk away,
Mm-hmm.
and I would follow her because I know,
Yep.
I mean, I knew it was a situation that was going to hurt, and I would follow her, and then she'd start crying when she was away, and this when she was little. Um, but
Getting
what I was going to mention is, like Gary talks about depression coming from the gut, because the brain doesn't feel, it just gives
just
us a message that hey, this is what I think that this is. Um, I know you're probably familiar with the term a flat affect,
Mhm.
but one of the things that happens in depression is there are no highs and lows. So one of the consequences of pushing feelings down and not acknowledging them is that flat affect. Because if you're always pushing those negative emotions away, eventually you're also going to do the same thing to the positive one, because your nervous system is so overstimulated from all of these triggers, from all these negative emotions, all these different pains in your life that you're not allowing to speak through you, then all the good ones are going to be there as well.
Yeah, it's a spectrum. You can't truly understand pleasure and joy if you don't allow yourself to feel sorrow and sadness. You know what I mean? Like the opposite parts of it. Like you have to, and I always say it's not about when you're regulating the nervous system, everyone's like, "Oh, you got to get to the zen regulated space." Well, you don't stay there. Like that's not realistic. And if you did, just like a heartbeat, this is how I always explain it, just like a heartbeat, like if you stayed in that zone all the time, you'd be
You'd
flatlined.
be flatlined.
Flatlined means you're dead. Like, so in order to be alive, you're gonna have those ups and downs, those up and down ticks. That shows you that you're a part, you're living. It's where your baseline falls is the part. And like, is your heart rate up really high? Or is it in that more Zen central, like where you always come back to that baseline? Are you lower? Are you in the dorsal response? Like that part. And so that's why I always explain, because people are like, "Oh, I'm not healed because I this still triggers me and all of these things and my life isn't perfect." That's not the journey. Perfection, like
No.
we have to break that illusion down too. Perfection is not the journey. You're gonna still have, like, no matter how long in the journey process you're at, you're still gonna have those moments that life throws you lemons and you get to decide, am I gonna have that sour punch, or am I gonna turn it into lemonade? I hold the choice. I hold the power. It's my perspective that I want to take it as. And people can look at that and say, "Oh, well, that's so much like, oh, Jackie, is that borderline toxic positivity?" Not in my view, because it's not that I'm not acknowledging the lows. Like I acknowledge, I embrace anyone that knows me. Like Sandra, you said this about me
Yeah.
too. It's like I can honor the lows just as much as the highs and give them both space, and they're both belong, and there's no judgment in any of it. Because that is the human experience, is to experience the full spectrum.
So you're talking about toxic positivity. I was that.
Mhm.
I probably completely embodied when you think of toxic positivity. Um, and what I mean by that is I would work like when something really horrible happened. I mean, there's a silver lining in everything that happens in your life. And it may take years to see that silver lining, but there's always that silver lining. What I would do is when something really crappy happened, um, instead of acknowledging that this really crappy thing happened, I would immediately go and try to find even a little kernel of what the positive outcome or what the positive thing was, instead of accepting and acknowledging and feeling that this was a really crappy thing.
Ouch.
I'll
That
give you
hurt.
I'll give you an example of this because I was dating this guy and I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. And he was a friend from long before. And I knew it wasn't go anywhere because he smoked, but he lived at a distance. So we only saw each other once in a while. And when he ended it, he did it in a really crappy way. Like it was he just was not available. Wouldn't talk, or if we talked, it was like really brief and then he had to go. So it was such a change.
Mhm.
And it really hurt. And I remember talking with my friend. I said, like, hey, I get it. There's a distance thing. He was married to an emotionally distant woman, all this kind of stuff. And I was so focused on the why of what he did. Not that I wanted the relationship to continue, but it was how he did it that hurt. But I didn't acknowledge that.
But
I
you were
said, yeah,
making it mean that you were
it
not enough or something along those
no,
lines.
no, 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 I wasn't making it about me. I was making it about the situation. Like, hey, we live far apart and I can see why he wouldn't. I mean, he's left a marriage with an emotionally distanced woman and now he's with someone who is geographically distant and kind of giving him the buyout. And then months later, I'm like, I said to my friend, I said, he was truly, the way he did this is truly an asshole. And I mean, he took a friend, we were friends, and we had developed a friendship before anything had happened. And I said, by doing what he did, he wasn't a friend,
Mhm.
obviously. And he's ruined that friendship. But this was a really, excuse my language, shitty way of dealing with this.
Mhm.
And you know what? I'm really angry about
That's what I
what
was
he did
talking
here.
about. At first, we're projecting it's all outside because we're avoiding what we're
Yeah.
feeling and what we're making it mean inside because it's easier to, okay, I can rationalize it. I'm going to do out here
Hmm.
until all of a sudden the time goes and I go, ooh, that's what that makes me feel.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but it took a while for me to acknowledge that I was really angry about how he handled that. And my friend was like, "It's about time."
So true. Well, it's because no one can tell you it. You've got to come and you got to feel safe enough in your own emotions to be able to go there. And like as you were sharing, like the big thing that kept popping out at me is that conversation of the word but. Like that's
Yes.
that's where a lot of the times the toxic positivity comes in. It's not that you can't hold the positive. It's you're negating everything else and just focusing on it. So like this situation happened, but this growth happened. Like, yes, it's beautiful that the growth happened, but you then just totally ixnayed the feeling of the pain that was the lesson itself too. So that's why I always say use the word and.
Hmm.
This happened and I feel and I embrace that situation and this is coming from it. So I'm grateful for this, but I'm also acknowledging here
So,
as
but you just said, but
yes, sorry. And I'm acknowledging all of that. I
yeah,
guess I guess
just
I can
pointing
use
that
the
out.
word but there because I want to negate it. Like that I
Yes.
want to negate that way of
Okay.
functioning
I'm
for me.
teasing you.
Yeah, in that
And
space.
and for anyone listening to this, just know that however is just a fancy butt.
I
Because
love it.
I've had people do that as
Mhm.
well. Okay, so I don't say but, and then they say however. Okay, well that's just a fancy but.
Well, yeah, and you and sometimes there's a need for it, but it's
Hmm.
also remembering every time that word comes on my mouth, I'm negating what comes first.
Hmm.
So if that thing that comes first is actually potent and powerful and important, we don't want to use that word.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Like
for sure.
cancel delete doesn't mean beat yourself or feel guilty about using
Oh
it.
no.
It's like, oh, I just caught myself. Cancel delete that, and this is what's going on. Absolutely.
Exactly. Exactly. But yeah, and I've changed my viewpoint of resilience back to because I was really struggling with that. I
Mhm.
was really struggling that the word resilience is bringing me into who I was that
Mhm.
ignored how I was feeling and wouldn't acknowledge that. And how it created how it, like as you said, how it created a wall around my heart in terms of protection,
Yes.
and embracing the knowledge that resilience, um I mean, I had a very long career with our insurance company here dealing with people with injuries. I've seen people have accidents that, looking at the damage, would have been no more than hitting a speed bump hard, if that. And it completely changed their whole life. So I used to look at, okay, so I've had all these accidents, all these injuries, not one of them has stopped me.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes it's very slow movement, continue to move forward.
Mhm.
And so I really started to put a very negative twist on the word resilient, that it actually meant something else. And through conversations with you and through reflections with me, and and conversations with other people, it's like, well, and resilience is more, it's not about being that stone wall, so to speak,
Mhm.
that the wind and whatever, eventually, if a stone wall is just standing there and it doesn't have a base down below, there can be a strong enough wind that comes
Mhm.
and knocks it over,
Yep.
right? Or waves knocks it over. Resilience is more like being a tree. And it depends on the tree, because some trees do not flex as much. And
Mhm.
I forget which tree it is, but there's one tree that is very flowy
Mhm.
and it will bend and the trunk will move back and forth, and the roots hold it,
Yep.
and it doesn't fall. Like the branches, the leaves, all that might break off and everything, but the tree itself is solid. Like we have a Douglas fir in our backyard, and we were getting worried about it
Mhm.
because it's super tall. I don't even know. It's probably 100 feet tall. I don't know. Or maybe not 100 feet. I don't know. I'm not
It's
very
tough.
good at it's really, really tall. And we were looking at it and thinking, man, if one of the winds come, because we do get winds
Mhm.
sometimes that are really strong. If one of those winds comes and it falls on our house or on a neighbor's house, and we had an arborist come out and he says, you don't have to worry about this tree. If this tree falls, there's going to be so much else that's happened around here that this will be the least of the problems, because this is a Douglas fir. It's solid, its roots go down really deep.
Yep.
Now, in a I back up onto a park. It's across the street. You go in there after a really big windstorm, and when because we're technically a rainforest, a temporal rainforest. Um, and you go in there after a windstorm and you will see trees that have been blown over,
Mhm.
but their root system is only a few feet
Yep.
deep.
Very
So
shallow surface roots versus
that's right, because they don't the roots don't need to get dig down, and it's also the type of tree. I think the only reason they grow there is because of the fact that
yeah, they
it's in a moist area. So those will just get completely pulled down. Well, that's probably a better example of what I was in
thank you
my
for resilience.
old resilient mindset, is that, you know, the winds would come along and things would happen and I would get knocked down. I'd get back up. These trees don't get back up. Don't. But
But I mean, technically, if you probably did, if you set it back up because their root system, I mean, they could maybe.
yeah, it definitely could get reattached because the root systems are so shallow. Whereas a real resilience is like that Douglas fir in the back. It can withstand the buffets of the wind. It can withstand major major windstorms, all that kind of stuff.
It's flexible. Instead of
Because
rigid, it's flexible. It
yeah,
moves. It doesn't mean that it doesn't get beat up in the wind a little bit, but it
yeah,
still stands because it's so rooted in its truth where it is, and in that space, it's rooted so deeply in its core that even though it's shaking around, it will never fall in that space. It takes quite a lot to knock it loose.
yeah, to get those roots up. So yeah.
It's kind of like the analogy that I always say is becoming the eye of the storm. Is like you're not going to stop, like that tree cannot stop the winds from coming. Like that's
Hmm.
not its mission in life. It's not that, but it learns how to work with it instead of against it. So instead of, if you think about it, if you're fighting the wind and you're tensing everything up and you're pushing the situation and you're going like this versus you just going with the flow and going, okay, whatever, rock me wherever you need to go. But eventually you're going to get tired, not me. I'm just dancing with you in that space. And that's what it is. It's like finding the eye of the storm, is because if you think of an eye of a storm, that's normally where it's like centered and pieced, and like,
And quiet.
yeah, everything else is still spinning in the craziness, but you're finding your own center in that, and being more of an observer of what's happening. That doesn't mean that there might be not a gust where you kind of sway a little bit, but it's not, you're not in the violence of it in that space. And being the eye of the storm doesn't mean that to get to the eye of the storm, you have to go through that journey, right? You have to go through the wind spaces to get there. And it's just knowing that it is possible. It is possible. It takes effort. It takes commitment. It takes bravery and risk to get in there and put yourself out there, the vulnerability of being in that space. But once you get there, that's your peace. That's your tranquility. That's your center.
And also recognizing that the storm isn't going to last.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like if I, and it's kind of it's the analogy of, when you see a beautiful rushing river, where is it that you want to be? Do you want to be sitting on a rock, admiring and watching the flow of the river, even though I mean, you can be really close and it can still have that, I mean, you can still kind of
Yeah, it's
not
still
be
spraying
scared,
you and
not be scared, but you're still, like you say, getting
on alert.
scared, dip your feet into it. Or do you want to be right, not on top of the rapids? Because there's three perspectives you can be. You can be sitting on the banks,
Mhm,
having the spray happen. You can be in that river raft,
mhm.
riding that river,
Yep.
which I think some people get addicted to that.
Mhm.
You know,
The rush.
the rush of always being there. Or you can be right in the river and, gasping for air whenever you lift up. And
Barely staying
that's
alive.
where you really get beat up, is when you're right in
Especially with
there.
all the rocks under, like constantly.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Yes, I love that analogy. And
Hmm.
there's no right or wrong place. It's just all of experience of where do you want to experience this.
And you can have a situation where you're in all of them.
Hmm.
You can, like, something can happen, say for instance, with the analogy of the river, something can happen and throw you right in there. And it's like, oh, holy mackerel. And you finally drag yourself out, and then you're kind of lying on the bank of the river and looking at it. And then maybe, I mean, for whatever you want to explore in terms of your emotion, you actually want to ride it, because then you can, because maybe it's your time to experience a little bit more deeply than just being an observer.
Yeah. It's a
And
different
experience,
perspective and a relationship with it. You're not fearing it. You're like, okay, I'm gonna meet you, but this time I'm not gonna, it's not a power struggle. Like you're not overpowering me. We're gonna have this balance.
yes, and have a dance with it.
Hmm. And a respect. Like when you're riding the water, you have a respect of the power of the water under you.
Yes.
Because if you know the power that holds, like you're not going to jump in the middle of that by yourself normally if you have a respect for the power of the water in that space. But when you ride it, there's a whole nother dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I love
Yeah. Me too. Me
it. Is
too.
there anything else that you want to share with the listeners, or anything else on your heart to really dive into, or even coming to conclusion, whatever you think?
Um, I think for me, um, the biggest the biggest how, with changing how I was looking at the word resilient. Um, because as I said right at the start, I was really struggling
Mhm.
with leaving my name up, or leaving me up as a resilient coach, or resilience coach. For me, the biggest change was embracing me. and opening up my heart, not to others, but to myself, which because I've tended to trust people first
Mhm.
until they would give me a reason to not trust them. And
And ignore the
trusting,
little things inside. You didn't
yeah,
want
yeah,
yourself used
yeah,
to.
no, the little things, and even many times, even when I would recognize, like, this is a huge red flag. This is not something I want to be involved in, and ignoring that, and just there again finding, okay, yes, but look at this clicks so many boxes for me in terms of what I'm looking for or whatever. So, and just focusing on that instead of there again ignoring
Yep.
all of the red flags, all of the negative emotions, all of that, and justifying their existence
Yep.
just for that glimmer of the hope of it. Um, so opening up my heart and working on breaking down the walls around my heart. And it's not breaking down the walls around my heart for others, it's breaking down the wall of heart for myself. And I think that was what I was lacking the most,
Mhm.
is that love of me and loving myself and knowing that I am worthy, because I didn't think I was.
Mhm.
And ultimately that's what it breaks down to, is my self-worth was so low, even though it's improved since being with my ex-husband, but it was still so low that I chose to really try to find whatever positive and ignore all of the boundaries that were being stepped on. So now I'm creating those boundaries, and even though, um it can hurt people, or maybe not hurt. Actually, I don't know how they feel, and how they feel is none of my business,
Responsibility. Yep. I
right? Hey, look at
love
that,
it. I'm just sitting over here clapping. Like,
eh? It's tapping into what's important for me, and I'm not out to hurt anyone.
that's never the
And the
intent.
most the most important person that I don't want to hurt is me. So sacrificing, like dying on the rock, or sacrificing myself for someone else who ultimately would never give that sacrifice back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we talked about that too. Instead of building the fortress, the Fort Knox is having like this bubble. And the bubble is actually the best security because it's not that it's nothing can come in or out. It's like a warning symbol of, hey, this is here. Do you want to acknowledge it now and turn it away and say, nope, that's not my truth? Bounce off the bubble? Or do you say, okay, that has space to come in and play, and so I can accept and learn and grow from it in that space? It doesn't mean that you'll never have those ooh moments, but that's how you grow. It's that's how you experience life. Because if you have a Fort Knox, you can't, like we are talking about before, it's like you numbed out everything. Nothing can come in. And we were talking about how some of the people that we ignore the red flags, we allow them in the fortress, and really we're causing ourselves more pain than it would be if the gates were wide open sometimes. Because the ones that are
And
close.
in that Fort Knox with those people
Mhm.
like that, one of the problems is that it's hard to get them out.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, once someone comes in, then if you have a Fort Knox,
Mhm.
it's just as hard to get them out.
Well, and it almost feels like, to me, it's like that feeling of trappedness. Like no matter how protected you are, you're like the princess in the castle. You know what I mean? Like you can observe whatever, but you can't truly experience and understand when you're up in the tower in that space. And so it's allowing yourself to really experience and know that, hey, I'm gonna get some scraped knees. That's life. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is a choice. And yes,
Right.
that may seem like a harsh statement to a point of like, Jackie, I don't choose to suffer, but there's always more options. And I say that from the most humbled place because I've experienced it. I've had to use that exact same thing to me, my own self of, okay, remember, you're choosing to suffer in this. There's always a choice here. It may not be the road most traveled. It may not be the easiest terrain to navigate, but I have a choice.
And it's a very different comment than saying suck it up, buttercup,
Mhm.
because saying suck it up, buttercup, or a lot of those, it's not acknowledging the pain aspect of things that happen. So it's a much healthier way to look at it. Like, hey, this happened. This stressor happened. I mean, we and stressors are going to happen our whole life. I I remember reading this years ago, and a person came into his priest and he says, "I'm just tired of all of the stress and all of the things that are happening in my life. I just want it done. How do I get away from all of the crap that life is throwing at me?" And he says, "Let's go for a walk." And so he took the person out into the graveyard and he says, "Nothing bad is happening to these people. So you're living life, things are going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
When they stop happening is when you're in here."
Yeah, it's true. And people think automatically when you hear the word stress, they think negative stress. But do you know just as much stress as those positive stressors too? Good
Yeah,
things happen,
babies.
but they bring change.
Hmm.
And change stirs things up. And so then you have to navigate and figure out new pathways of doing things. And then the brain's like, okay, now I have to tap into my neuroplasticity. Let's find a new road because my normal way of doing things isn't working. In that, and that's actually what the human experience is. It's about the growth. We're never meant to be stagnant. Because like
Nope.
I said, once you stop moving and you're stagnant, the only reason you should be doing that is if you're in the ground. Like you get to adapt and adjust and flow and figure that out. And like I said, sometimes that's not comfortable, but it's needed in life.
Well, and there's a difference between being stagnant and resting.
Yes, the
Because
pause.
because because I mean, and this was also me too. Like for me to be still, sorry.
Clear that throat chakra.
Um, for me to be still, I had difficulty. I needed to be in constant motion. I needed to be doing something at all times. And that's also not honoring for your body. So for anyone listening here, when we're talking about stagnant, we're not talking about taking rest.
Yeah,
Like,
rest and integration is actually a huge part of the journey
and
because you
that's
can
most
keep
of what
running.
people
Yeah, like you were saying with the emotions. Otherwise, you're literally driving through the neighborhood,
do. Hmm.
stopping the car, checking things out, interacting in that space. That's the integration. You can learn all the techniques in the world, but if you don't take the time to integrate and apply it and experience it how it works for you, it's never turned into the wisdom.
Yeah.
It's never actually integrated. It's never actually embodied. You can be the what like the smartest person in the world, but if you don't apply that smarts, what do you got?
Yeah. Oh, and we can keep going off on tangents because as soon as you said that, there was something that popped in my brain. It's like, oh yeah, oh yeah.
This is a little sneak peek into the conversations that Sandra and I have too. To be continued. That's what I always tell her. Like we're not going away from that topic. To be continued.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's so long, or not, long story short, but in summary, the word resilience is, I no longer look at that as being, it doesn't have that negative connotation anymore for me. It's realizing that truly my survival, um and not only my survival, like I use the more negative um connotation of the word resilience to get me through
Mhm.
a lot of stuff, um and and that's what I needed to do that.
Serve the purpose at the time.
right? And recognizing that, and recognizing the fact that that no longer serves that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I hurt people, I hurt my kids. Being that person, because I kind of looked at it that no, number one, you don't show what you're feeling.
You're in survival mode.
You shut everyone, you're not going to show how much pain you're in to anyone, which
Because they could
I
use
mean
it as a weakness. They can use it against you.
that, well, and also to open that door could have meant for me just a complete breakdown of non-functioning.
Yep.
And I wasn't in a position where I could not function. I mean, I'm a single parent working full time, raising two kids, and I couldn't not be in a position of function, or at least that's what was in my brain.
Yep. That
Whether
was
or
the
not that was
story.
true,
Mm-hmm.
that was my story. And moving forward and being able to adjust and learn and grow from that knowledge, and changing that word resilience to really be what it is, which is being flexible, being able to adjust and adapt. And I'm continuing my journey to become that that person that I was meant to be.
Yes.
Right. And really, I mean, that person that I was meant to be, I was meant to be this person that I am at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's a continual journey. Like I'm not negating who I am. It's a continual journey to shed the trauma, the emotions, to adapt them, to be an example for myself. Like I used to always think, okay, yeah, you gotta be an example for other people. No, I need to be an example for me.
Yeah. If they want
And
to
by
take
being,
it and resonate it and run with it, awesome. But my intention is me. I show up to
yeah,
serve me and let the ripple happen.
that's right. So being that example for me, it allows other people around me to be that example for themselves.
Yes. I love that. I love that. And as you're saying that, like that's what this podcast is all about. I hear you saying, like we took the word resilience and it meant something and we broke it down, right? Just like I say in the intro of this podcast, if you listen to the intro, we break it down, we deconstruct and then reconstruct it in love and acceptance. That's what it's all about. I love that. Well, thank you all for tuning in and listening to us. Sandra will be back, don't worry. Always. And I will have all of her information plus mine in the show notes so you can reach out and connect. Please reach out. Let us know what you think of this episode. We're always open to have a chat. We are very loving, accepting human beings. So until next week, I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Soul Revolution Tribe and being part of our soul family. If anything in this episode resonated with you, please subscribe, leave a review, and share your takeaways. You can find me on IG at Grow with Jackie B or on YouTube at Soul Revolution Tribe. I will see you next week for more soul conversations and medicine. Bye for now and see you back soon.